Welcome to our new reality where we see each other in our living rooms and home offices and I don't know, bedrooms or wherever. But that's what it is. I hope you're all healthy. I hope you're all well, and of course, stay well. And since the semester is going on for another month, and certainly Israel, things there are never standing still. We want to provide you with some updates, what's going on with our experts. We will have hopefully at least two more of these talks a week from now on the Arab Israeli population on the joint list and their situation, and in 2 weeks on legal questions, but constitutional question, a country without a constitution. And hopefully we will do this the next 2 Mondays, but we will definitely inform you about this. Our two experts today are two professors at American University. I'm very happy to welcome virtually Professor Guy Ziv from the Foreign Studies program at SIS, the School of International Service, and Professor Dan Arbell, who is a professor with Israel Studies at the AU for many years, used to be the Deputy Ambassador of Israel for many years, the DCM. So thank you all for coming. I can see a few of you. I can see definitely a lot of names. I think we have more than 50 participants. And the plan is that we would talk between us, maybe 25 minutes, not more than half an hour. And then we have half an hour for your questions. It was actually exactly, in a few days, it will be exactly a year ago that Israel had new elections. Nobody thought then, on April 9th of 2019, that it would be the first of a series of new elections. So far, we have had three. Who knows if it will be more, but three elections within a year. I'm asking Professor Ziv first, how did we get to the point where we are now? And I think probably everyone here, and I see students, I see friends, I see council members of the center, everybody has some idea of how we get this, and we'll wrap this up briefly. How did we get there, and where are we at now? And when I say now, I think it means 104, because things are changing any minute, literally, in Israel now.
Right. Well, first of all, thank you very much, Professor Brenner, for hosting us. We are at a time where dramatic developments are taking place as we speak, including moments ago that we'll talk about on this video chat. The last three rounds of the elections took place basically as a referendum, one can say, over Netanyahu. The issues were hardly discussed. And I'm talking about all the issues, the socioeconomic issues, the issues of security, annexation, sovereignty. These issues were all on the back burner. And to the extent that they were talked about, it was done in the wake of the Trump peace plan, which we might want to touch upon as well. But these were all side issues. The major issue was the rule of law. At least that's the issue that the centrist blue and white party headed by Benny Gantz emphasized and repeatedly promised and assured the voters that he wants to form a national unity government with Likud, but without Netanyahu, because he's unwilling to serve in a government headed by a prime minister under indictment. And Netanyahu was officially indicted prior to this third round of the elections. At the same time, he was contending with a lot of different competing forces. And one of the major, I would say, factors that led to the current coalition formation talks is the fact that Israelis are tired and exhausted with these elections. And when you look at polling, you find that a fourth round is kind of at the very bottom of the list of options that they would like to see. If you look at the top of that list, you see the idea of a national unity government. And so the impetus for forming this kind of national unity government is the coronavirus pandemic and implications on Israeli society and on the Israeli economy. One-fourth of Israelis is unemployed right now, which is up from something like 4% or under 5% prior to the pandemic. So there are big things that they need to address, and this was the pretext for the current round of negotiations. The left felt betrayed, and blue and white split officially, with two of its leaders, Gantz and Ashkenazi, apparently heading into this emergency national unity government led by Netanyahu. The other two, Moshe Ya'alon and Yair Lapid, are staying in the opposition and are joining together in a different party, which is Lapid's old party. And so today that brings us to the big developments today. There are three major developments that we've seen just earlier today. One is, and most importantly, that Benny Gantz appears to have caved on the issue of annexation. He's reportedly agreed to forego the right to veto an annexation decision. Netanyahu has only to consult with him, and with the blessing of the American president, which presumably he would get, Netanyahu would be able to go ahead with at least some of his annexation plans. A second major development is that the Labor Party is officially dead. And I say that even though it's been kind of struggling for many years now, but Amir Peretz, the leader of the Labor Party, may turn out to be the very last leader of the Labor Party, because he has decided to join forces to merge whatever's left of his Labor Party with Benny Gantz's blue and white. And that's today's news as well. And then the third major development, of course, is the big picture, which is that Netanyahu's career, which seemed to be on the line. He seemed to be on his way out. Apparently that's been saved. And now they need to simply work on the details in order to sign that agreement. And literally minutes before the call, there was a report on kind of a last-minute coalition hurdle, disagreements over appointment of judges. This was a demand made by Likud and something that the blue and white party, because it ran on the issue of the rule of law, is not willing to cave on, at least not yet. And so that's where things stand at the moment.
Thank you, Guy. I'll turn it over to Professor Arbell. Dan, we heard about, and that is of course pretty recent, Benny Gantz perhaps giving in on annexation. Maybe you can comment a little bit on this. And what is his actual stand? He never really made that clear during the campaign. And the second important point, we just heard the Justice Ministry and the appointment of judges. Maybe you can say a few more words about it.
Sure. Can you hear me? Great. So it's great to be here. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Laura, for hosting. And it's fun finally getting dressed up to be on a call nowadays, as we spend time in our sports gear usually. In any case, Guy's covered pretty extensively the terrain. I'd like to add that Gantz's position on the implementation of the Trump peace plan was that he agreed that this is something that Israel should pursue, but at the same time he was talking about very vaguely about the need for some broader international cooperation or coordination or consultation over how to go about doing that implementation. And later on, as negotiations between Likud and Blue and White continued, Gantz's position crystallized even further. And as of yesterday, we've heard that he, first of all, insisted that there would not be any unilateral action, that any withdrawal, any implementation of the plan should be in a broader context of a peace move or a political move. He also insisted that the annexation would be of areas within the settlement blocks right along the Green Line, and not be in isolated settlements which are beyond the settlement blocks. He insisted that there will be coordination, cooperation with Jordan, with Egypt, even with Palestinian Authority, as he did not want to undermine the peace treaties with Jordan and Egypt. And so all this were issues that he kind of was messaging. But today, as Guy's mentioned, it turns out that he has caved in on these demands, and he's agreeing to some cosmetic changes that will make him perhaps look like he is, that Likud is accepting his position, that any annexation will be done in agreement between the parties, but he doesn't have a veto over a decision, that Netanyahu cannot bring this to a decision or to a vote in the Knesset before July, which is 3 months from now. So he's agreeing to have annexation take place after the 3 month period, and seems that he's allowing Netanyahu to have it his way in terms of his plan to annex or to apply Israeli sovereignty. You have to understand Netanyahu's angle is that he feels very much pressured as time goes by. The clock is running out on the Trump presidency. With the coronavirus outbreak in the United States, there's a sense that perhaps some miraculous way there will be a change in the come November 2020, and the new resident in the White House, perhaps Joe Biden, and that kind of puts Netanyahu in pressure as he's thinking about his legacy also, as he'd like to leave on a note that he's done something that no other leader has done before, and that is annex parts of the West Bank. So that's also another option. One more talk about, on the judges selection process, I'd like to add that there is a judge selection committee, a 9-member committee. And that committee, a majority is enough in that committee to appoint judges. No one has veto power in that committee. You just need a majority. It's comprised of the Justice Minister, of Supreme Court judges in the present and in the past, the head of the Israeli Bar Association. So I think that Gantz is insisting that Netanyahu will not have a veto in that committee, and that's something that still needs to be worked out, as Yamina, the right nationalist party, is pressing Netanyahu not to give up on this issue. And we've heard just before coming to this meeting today, to this conversation here, that Yamina is threatening not to join the coalition if Netanyahu agrees, not to have the veto power, or agrees to Gantz's position on the judges selection process. So we still need to wait out for what happens next.
Right, thank you. And I want to make clear, of course, there is no unity government or emergency government yet. There is still all these negotiations going on, and there is still a possibility of this falling apart and actually having fourth elections, although it doesn't look like it. But we were already more than once at a point where it didn't look like that. Let me go back maybe to Professor Ziv. Guy, would you, many people, of course, now see Benny Gantz as the weak part of this coalition. He was the head of staff. He was the military leader of Israel. He was a strong person. Also, he came across as a strong leader in the election campaign. But now it seems he's caved in to a lot of Likud's demands. How much leverage does he have, or did he actually have in these negotiations, given that there is not only possibility, basically people already split off his, not only the blue and white, but even his own faction within blue and white is not strong. New polls show that actually Likud may be rising among voters. So how much leverage is this just the last straw he can hold on to just be part of this new coalition? And is the price too high for that? What's your take on that, Guy?
My take is that if we had this discussion several weeks ago, my answer would have been he has quite a bit of leverage, because Netanyahu had a minority of support in the new Knesset, or in the aftermath of the latest round of the Israeli elections. He didn't have the 61, whereas Benny Gantz did, even with the defection of Orly Levy, who ended up recommending neither Gantz nor Netanyahu for the premiership. But at the end of the day, the president tapped Benny Gantz, not Netanyahu, to form the coalition. So he started out with quite a bit of leverage. Today he has far less leverage, very little leverage. And this is a big victory, I would say, for Netanyahu, who's often been called a political magician. And one thing he's tried to do for the last year, ever since the formation of this blue and white slate, has been to split it. And there have been rumors after rumors, many of them false, many of them fake reports about disagreements and divisions within that team. And to their credit, they were able to stay together longer than some people had anticipated. But at the end of the day, Benny Gantz is a new politician. He's an amateur, essentially. And it's not a coincidence that those who had the experience of serving in Netanyahu's governments in the past, such as Moshe Ya'alon on the right and Yair Lapid in the center, warned Benny Gantz and Gabi Ashkenazi repeatedly not to enter these talks with Netanyahu because he's going to prevail and this will save his career. And they didn't listen to them. And so that explains the split. It's a big victory for Netanyahu because if there is going to be a fourth round of elections and nobody knows, this would be most likely a victory for Likud, barring other unanticipated events, of course.
Right. And let me go to you, back to you, Dan. Of course, one of the big questions is where do we stand on the indictment? Is that off the schedule for now? Is that off, or is it just postponed, or will it be part of the negotiations for the coalition if there is one?
So first of all, we know that the trial has been postponed to May. That was as a result, an immediate result of the decision by the Minister of Justice, Amir Ohana, back in March to basically close down the court system unless there are some urgent matters. And this was not in the list of urgent matters. And so the trial got pushed up to May. But even then, seems to be part of the agreement between Likud and Blue and White that Netanyahu can serve as prime minister and later, after the rotation in 18 months, as acting prime minister while still under indictments, while facing a trial. So basically, both sides have agreed that the trial may continue. There may be sessions in court, which Netanyahu will be coming to as prime minister or later as acting prime minister. Yet that will not prohibit him from continuing with his public service. This is a change, an amendment to Israeli basic law government, which stipulates that any other person besides a prime minister under indictment has to step down if being indicted. So the law is part of the coalition agreement that's being cooked up is that the law will be amended, and that way it will allow Mr. Netanyahu both to serve as prime minister and later as acting prime minister while there's a trial going on. And Netanyahu has said, I'm sure that he'll try in some ways to, bring to a situation where there's no trial, or there's a way to postpone the trial indefinitely. But even so, even if he does not, then I do foresee a situation in which there will be a trial on one hand, and he'll continue with running the affairs of the country on the other hand.
Thank you. And of course, I want to stress again, there are so many options still possible. It's possible that, if he really proves a magician, Netanyahu might succeed in just gaining a few members of the Blue and White Party and leaving Gantz out in there, and people who split off. That's all possible too. On the other side, though, as you said before, the Yamina party, the party right of Netanyahu, right of Likud, also didn't consent yet to be part of that coalition. Do you see right now we have the plan of this unity or emergency coalition is to unite parties from labor, or whatever is left of labor, it's not much of a little party anyway, all the way to the right-wing religious and the ultra-Orthodox parties. Do you see this, how do you see the options of such a coalition staying on for 18 months and then actually fulfilling the promise and staying on for another 18 months under Benny Gantz? It wasn't, I should also say, it happened before once in the 1980s between then Likud leader Yitzhak Shamir and Labor leader Shimon Peres, where they did have a coalition, a rotation coalition, where they changed government. But it was very different back then. How do you see it now?
So first of all, to your question on Yamina, I think it's very important to know that part of Netanyahu's success is the fact that he has managed to keep his bloc intact. 58 members of Knesset are still loyal to him. 58 Knesset members still see him as, do not challenge his leadership in any sort of way. So that's part of his being a magician, the fact that he kept them together through through 3 election cycles, bending their arms and being able to continue to lead and keep the bloc intact. The fact that Yamina is now threatening to leave is not something that I'm sure he's not pleased about, and he'll try his utmost to keep Yamina in the bloc. But then again, he doesn't need them right now in the short term, in terms of number of hands that he needs to raise to pass, to win the Knesset's confidence in a confidence vote, or when the coalition is established. However, if he lets Yamina go, he kind of loses the rightward edge of the government. Then he's left with parties that are Likud party, and then ultra-religious parties who are not necessarily do not necessarily hold right-wing positions or nationalist positions on issues of territory, the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. But back to your question about what happens in 18 months, or whether any changes can be made. Well, it seems that this bloc of 58 is loyal to Mr. Gantz. Let's say to Mr. Netanyahu. And if Gantz manages somehow to become prime minister and rule over this broad coalition in which he's in the minority, there will only be 19 to 20 members supporting him, while there will be 58 supporting the other side. It will be very hard for him, first of all, to govern, and you'll need a lot of play a balancing act to keep that thing together. And still, I see that Gantz has really suffered a major blow as a result of the split in blue and white, and also his popularity, I think, took a plunge, and it will be very hard for him to make a political comeback. In the next 18 months, you'll have to kind of, and what Guy said, he's a novice, inexperienced politician. It will be very, very difficult for him to govern. Not impossible, but extremely difficult to rule, I would say.
Thank you.
Guy, do you want to add something to this before we open it up?
Just very quickly, and I agree with everything that Dan said here. We're going to see a game of musical chairs in the weeks and the months ahead, with Knesset members from one party or one faction of one party jumping ship to another. But at the big picture here is that Likud has been left intact as the single largest dominant player in Israeli politics, despite it all. There's no party now that can rival Likud, so we're merely talking about a possibility of future elections, which may happen sooner than later. I doubt we're going to see a government lasting for its full 4-year term. But I also doubt that we're going to see anything like the blue and white centrist party that was able to get as many seats, or nearly as many seats, as Likud in the foreseeable future. So we're going to see musical chairs. We're going to see perhaps new leadership emerging in the center-left bloc as it realigns itself, and then at some point we will be talking about Netanyahu's successor, whoever it is, because there are people waiting in the wings. But at this point, one of the big questions is the settler lobby, is Yesha and the settler lobby going to be satisfied with the emerging coalition. This is something that is very important to Netanyahu and to his legacy.
Well, thank you. I think we got a lot of input here on a question we might call these days, how is this Israeli government different from any other Israeli governments? But we want to open it up. Laura, are you here? Yes, I can't hear you, but.
So, yes, and I should have said earlier, people are getting more and more familiar with the technology, but if you click where it says speaker view on the top of your screen, you can see the speaker big instead of seeing just a checkerboard of people. So we're opening it up to questions, and we can unmute people who have a question. So if you have a question, do you want to let us know? I also, via the chat, so there's a little thing that says chat at the bottom of your screen. You can type your question or just say, I have a question. I want to say a special hello to so many students who are joining us. And also, in particular, I see current Israel Studies minors, Jacob Lewis. I see past minors. We have a lot of alumni. We actually have a few students and ex-students who are in Israel. So Jess, wave your hand. There's Jess. She worked for the center for 4 years, and she's now at Tel Aviv University doing a master's in public health with a focus on disaster management. And while she's doing that, she's interning with the Israeli Ministry of Public Health. So she's on the front lines here, as well as Shelley DiCarlo, who was, I think, one of the many class of 2018, which seems to be the big winner here, people joining from the class of 2018. So if you can show your faces, it would be great to see more of you at this point in the conversation. And let's see if we have anybody wanting to, okay, Matan.
And Hillary too.
Yes, Matan Admi has a question. Eric, if you can unmute Matan. And then Nicholas, we'll take your questions one by one.
Laura, you might want to do it in the order in which the questions were asked. It might be easier to do it that way.
Okay, I was doing it in the order of current students first, but that's fine. We can do it that way. Matan?
Sure. Hi. Hope you all are staying safe and healthy. So my question regards the logistics. Can you guys hear me, by the way?
Yes.
Okay.
Introduce yourself first, Matan.
So my name's Matan Admi. I'm a student in the School of International Service, class of 2022. My question is about the logistics of unity governments in general, because there's only really been one. So I know that different ministries will be given to different parties as a result of negotiations, but what about lower level political appointments? Would we possibly see a Kahol Lavan ambassador to the US that reports to a Likudnik Minister of Foreign Affairs? Like, is that sort of like a political outcome that would be possible?
Maybe we'll give this to the former deputy ambassador.
Well, the idea, again, we'll have to look very carefully in the coalition agreement that is signed. But from reports that are coming out in recent days, we can see that there's a kind of an equal mechanism of equality, that each side, the blue and white side and the right bloc side or the Likud side, have an equal say. And they need to reach decisions in consensus. And so the whole, in the past, in the Shamir Peres government of 1984 through 1990, two governments, then they had kind of a smaller cabinet made up of several ministers from each side that in matters of disagreement, they were deferred to this inner smaller cabinet that used to deliberate and reach a decision. Of course, it was known as the Prime Minister's Club which was an even smaller mechanism within the National Unity Government, comprised of Rabin, Shamir, and Peres. So obviously, Shamir was in a minority in that three-way group, but still he had his weight did carry, and they did have to reach a decision and consensus. So the case here in this new government remains to be seen. There will be a security cabinet that will deliberate the more sensitive national security issues. They may establish a mechanism of Netanyahu plus another person from Likud, together with Gantz and Ashkenazi, as kind of either a triumvirate or a quartet that will be dealing with the most sensitive issues. So that remains to be seen. As in terms of ambassadors, you may have a situation in which a blue and white ambassador will have to report to a Likud minister or vice versa. But prior to that, there will have to be an agreement between Netanyahu and Gantz as to the identity of that particular diplomat. And obviously, in matters of Washington and the UN, there will probably be this will be decided between Gantz and Netanyahu very carefully, and so we'll have to win the approval of both leaders of this government, any ambassador in an important place. But it can happen that a representative that is more identified with one side may have to answer or get his marching orders from someone in the other party.
Okay. Nicholas and then Hillary. Nicholas, I think you're unmuted.
Yes, thank you.
Introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Nicholas Luzzi. I'm a senior at American University in International Relations and Economics, set to graduate next month. And my question is about the nature of the Israeli electorate in the aftermath of this series of elections. So we've seen 3 elections now without a clear mandate for either Netanyahu or Gantz. So my question is, what does the future look like for the actual voters, the people actually electing the governments? Is there more division in the future, or are you expecting a shift one way or another that will lead to a more stable and a more defined government?
Guy, do you want to take this? And I guess we have already seen a shift over the last years, if not decades, to the right, but maybe you want to say a little more about that.
Sure. I mean, we've seen a shift over the years to the right, but I also don't know if it means all that much, given that there hasn't really been the kind of substantive issue-oriented debates that we saw in the 80s. I mean, Dan was talking earlier about the national unity governments of the 1980s. And back then, you really had ideological debates between Labor and Likud, the 2 dominant parties. Here, we're talking about a party, the blue and white slate, essentially, which didn't really have any kind of ideology. There were people on the left, there were people on the right, there were people whose views we have no idea even what their views were or are, or if they have any ideological ideas. So we're dealing with non-ideology here. And so it's been a personality-centered debate in Israel for many years, Netanyahu or no Netanyahu. And of course, the exceptions are the truncated left, which is more ideological, and then the Yesha and their supporters in the settlement movement and beyond. So the average Israeli, I don't think, is as interested or has been focusing on issues like security or peace. And so I think it'll be interesting to see whether or not we're going to see these debates emerge once Netanyahu takes a decision to go ahead with annexation. But there hasn't really been a national debate on this topic for many, many years.
Thank you. The next question.
Hillary?
Hi, everyone. I'm a very proud 1992 graduate of American University, and I happen to own a global branding consultancy. So my question is more about public perception. and I don't know who should take this, but my question is, in the wake of a global crisis that is in many ways far overshadowing what's going on in Israel in its entirety, do you think Netanyahu's status at the moment, the fact that he will still be in power regardless of his, let's say, legal status, will have an impact on Israel's reputation? That's part one. And if so, in what way, and how does that play out globally?
Who wants to take this?
I'm happy to just make one comment on this, which is I think the world isn't currently focusing on Israel or Netanyahu, and it may be a while before they do. But I think where we really are going to see a difference here is in Israel's relationship with the diaspora, specifically the American Jewish community, which is its most important diaspora. And here we've seen in recent years a divergence. And I think we'll see much more of that if some of Netanyahu's plans go ahead. If you have this kind of indicted prime minister who's already under a cloud of corruption, who's going to be taking on dramatically new policies that will also placate the religious community in Israel. And when I say religious community in Israel, I'm referring specifically to the ultra-Orthodox, which has a monopoly. And that doesn't sit well with the American Jewish community and with the diaspora. So there's where I think we're going to see more tensions and a deterioration in the relationship.
I should maybe add at this moment, as in all of those, in all countries, of course, Corona creates its own laws also of the politics of each country. And since you mentioned the Orthodox or the ultra-Orthodox community, of course, this is one community in Israel that is hit very hard, partially also because it took them a long time to basically obey to the new standards. And it's also somewhat tragically, ironically, the Israeli health minister, Litzman, who was tested positive and is sick with coronavirus, and who was very hesitant to adopt the new standards. And let me just get into one more question here, maybe to Dan. That was a big issue. Should he stay the health minister or no, or not? Should the ultra-Orthodox party, which seems to be, let's say, a little more flexible on all of those new rules, very much in contrast to Netanyahu, but he wants to hold fast because he is a partner. He's the leader of the ultra-Orthodox party. So what do we see on this front?
Yeah, again, it's quite a shocking and disturbing, and also pretty sad turn of events to see what is happening with the Haredi, the ultra-Orthodox community in Israel, which are 8% of the population, yet they account for about 60% of the coronavirus cases, with a ticking time bomb in the city of Bnei Brak, about almost 200,000 residents, in which about more than a third are, there's an estimate that more than a third are carrying the virus. And so that may erupt, as well as other ultra-Orthodox towns across Israel and Haredi neighborhoods in Jerusalem. And so that's a disturbing factor. And the fact is, there are two aspects to it, Michael, and you alluded to them. One is the fact that, to begin with, the Haredi community doesn't always adhere to government orders and government ordinances, and they answer to a higher authority. And I don't mean God. They answer to their spiritual leaders. And if their spiritual leaders don't instruct them not to attend mass gatherings or mass services or funerals or just in general weddings, then they go ahead and they do that. And if their rabbis don't instruct them to stay at home, they go out. They don't. They have more respect for what the rabbis tell them. That, again, I'm generalizing here, but there are obviously extreme elements that are very radical and kind of oppose any state authority. But a lot of the ultra-Orthodox community are not respecting the laws. Then there's a political aspect to it. The fact that you've mentioned that these parties are very loyal to Mr. Netanyahu, and the reason and that led, unfortunately, to the fact that Mr. Netanyahu was more hesitant in applying pressure on these communities, instructing them in more forceful way to stay at home, to respect the laws, not to attend mass gatherings, and so on and so forth. It reached an ironic point this week, as you mentioned, Michael, the fact that the Minister of Health himself, Ministry of Health, who's spearheading the efforts on the coronavirus front, was caught violating his own ministry's orders, thus leading to him being found carrying the virus, testing positive, being quarantined now. That's exactly what we see, that not only do ordinary ultra-Orthodox Jews not respecting health ministry regulations, but the person standing at heading the ministry is not respecting his own ministry's regulations, which is something which is very regretful. So I think that this opens up, though, an opportunity, though, because in every crisis there's an opportunity, and we see the IDF, for instance, stepping into these ultra-Orthodox areas and providing food and transportation and medical equipment, and perhaps this will open up the eyes of many ultra-Orthodox Jews in Israel, that for the post-corona era, there will be a greater respect for the law, and perhaps greater respect for even the IDF and the role of the state in administering public order and public safety.
Thank you.
We have a question from another current student, Sydney.
Hi, I'm Sydney. I'm in Professor Arbell's class. I'm a sophomore double majoring in political science and women and gender studies. And my question was, I just wanted to know, what do you think the impacts of coronavirus are going to be on Israeli politics? Like, I think that before this happened, we would have definitely seen a different path taken than now after this kind of like crisis unfolding. So will you think politics will resume as normal? Will there still be another election? Or how greatly are things going to be impacted by this?
Thank you. Guy, you want to take this on?
I think when it comes to politics, we've already seen that it hasn't changed very much, that some of the same back and forth, accusations and political discussions are still taking place, at least at the coalition formation negotiations level. I think in terms of society, I think, I don't know if any of us, and I'm including ourselves here, are ever going to go back to quote unquote normal, or the situation that we had prior to the coronavirus. What we have seen is, so far, most Israelis, with the exception of the ultra-Orthodox community, as Dan was saying earlier, have been heeding the kind of self-isolation or social distancing measures that the government put in place. I don't know what's going to happen. None of us really knows what's going to happen. But I think that maybe there'll be some real changes societally for all of us in the wake of this pandemic.
And it already served as the major argument for Benny Gantz just to enter these negotiations in the government under Netanyahu. Under other circumstances, that might not have happened. So it did play already a big role in the last couple of weeks.
Although I would argue that was really more of a pretext, that he was tired, that he was exhausted, that he saw the polls, that Israelis were kind of fed up with the stalemate, and that was just an excuse really to enter.
Definitely be seen as a pretext, but without it, he wouldn't have had that excuse. Yeah,
that's right.
Matan, you have another quick question?
I actually answered my own question with a Google search, so never mind.
Okay, remember to write your questions in the chat. I actually wanted to ask, I'm putting her a little on the spot because I didn't tell her I was going to do this. Shelley DiCarlo, who is an alum who made Aliyah several years ago to Israel. Do you want to say anything about your experience, or can you hear us?
Hello?
Yes. It'd be great to see you too, but we can hear you.
Okay. Hi.
Hi, Sean.
So nice to be here and to hear from you guys. I'm sorry, can you repeat the question once more?
Oh, I'm just sort of saying, can you introduce yourself? How long have you been in Israel? How is it going there? Do you have a different take on this?
Sure. So I actually made Aliyah in the middle of my degree. I studied abroad at Hebrew University going into like the first semester of my junior year. And I actually transferred all my credits to IDC Herzliya and finished there. And then from there, I went straight to the Army and actually just finished like 3 weeks ago now. So yeah, I got discharged right in like as we were quarantining. So it's been an experience. We're all in lockdown. There's police in the streets. I'm living in Jerusalem now. So everyone's taking social distancing really seriously and just trying to have high hopes and high spirits and try and continue on as normal as possible.
Well, thank you. Great to see your face.
Of course.
Had a wonderful experience. People can, again, put their questions in the chat. Jess, do you have anything to add from Israel? Can't hear you. There.
I don't really have anything to add, other than, like she said, you know, the restrictions are getting a little bit heavier for Passover. I think it's going to be really interesting to see where the new unity government goes as far as, especially the health ministry. That's been something, especially with the Litzman not following his own regulations. It's become something of a conversation within the Israeli people. So this might be an opportunity for some positive change within the health ministry if Gantz and if the Blue and White Party takes over the health ministry, which I believe has been talked about quite a lot, and it was one of his major campaign platforms. It'll be really interesting to see where it goes. Also, I think that it's working really well here. We're seeing a lot of how used and how practiced the logistics system is here. So we're not facing nearly as many shortages, I feel like, as there are in the US, even though there is a national egg shortage right now.
Thanks, Jess. We also have a question from Bob Keats. Okay, there you go, Bob.
Thank you. Just wondering if Trump's suggestions about annexing part of the diaspora, I mean, the Judea and Samaria, I was wondering if the diaspora is being primarily so far to the left, and I know there shouldn't be a consequence in the decision, but to what extent is that impacting the blue and white or the whole equation in Israel?
Good question. Guy, do you want to take it, or
yeah? I think this is less about the diaspora and more about internal discussions in Israel and kind of the public opinion in Israel, but also the public opinion in Israel among the elites. And here we had a really interesting public plea from 220 senior Israeli security officials, the former heads of the Mossad, Shin Bet, and former top generals, who sent a plea to, issued a plea to Benny Gantz and Gabi Ashkenazi to refrain from agreeing to any sort of annexation, saying that this would endanger the future of the state of Israel. Now, there's no question that Gantz and Ashkenazi, two former IDF chiefs themselves, are well aware of this and understand the serious implications of annexation. For Israel, that could mean the end of the Jewish state, if we're looking at demographics here, the future of democracy, if we're looking at giving everyone the right to vote, and the future of Israel's relationship with Jordan, which has made it crystal clear that it will abrogate its treaty with Israel, that its relationship with Israel will essentially be destroyed if Israel goes ahead with all of its plans that Netanyahu issued before the election. So there are some very serious implications here that I think the leadership of Blue and White is going to have to grapple with, and the diaspora community is I think less of a factor here than the security establishment in Israel.
If I may just add a sentence to Bob's question, I think another major issue with Israel diaspora relation always has been about religion, but Jewish pluralism in Israel. Is it only the Orthodox are recognized or not? And one thing we actually kind of didn't even mention in our whole conversation today is the original problem to forming a coalition last year, which is a name that didn't pop up yet, is Avigdor Lieberman, the leader of the Russian secular party. And he was the one who always urged for this unity government, but a very different one. He thought it would be Benny Gantz, Netanyahu, and probably himself, but not the ultra-Orthodox. And that, I think, could indeed be a problem in the longer run, especially between American Jews who are mostly Reform or conservative or non-affiliated, and in Israel that does not recognize the Reform and the conservative movements or anyone who's not Orthodox in the same way. So of course they recognize them as Jews, but they don't recognize them in the same way in terms of giving their communities the same legitimacy and their leaders and their rabbinical representatives. So there I do see a problem, but that's really something we didn't touch on is where did this coalition without the Orthodox go? That's kind of off the table right now. But I see more questions.
Yeah, there's a running discussion in the chat about the role of the Arab Joint List.
Right.
I'm wondering if one of you can talk about that, and it sort of plays into what Michael was saying, that the unity government it looks like we're getting doesn't look like a unity government we might have thought a week or two ago. So,
because there's no
I'd like to say,
done.
So I'd like to address the Arab citizens of Israel, that issue. And the Joint List really had a remarkable achievement in the last elections, with winning 15 seats. And Ayman Ude, the member of Knesset, who's the leader of the Joint List, is quite I believe, a remarkable person. And also, he's had a few interesting statements recently on the eve of the corona outbreak, but also during crisis, in which he clearly indicated that Arab citizens of Israel want to play a more active role in the country, in society, in politics. And the fact that they all 15 members of the Joint List supported Benny Gantz's candidacy for prime minister is something significant. But we also see it in the coronavirus outbreak, which I believe is a watershed moment in Arab-Jewish relations, and the fact that 17% of doctors in Israel are Arab, 49% of nurses in Israel are Arab, many pharmacists in Israel are Arab. I think this puts the Arab citizens of Israel in the front line of combating the coronavirus. And I think it may have, I'm hoping it will have more positive implications in the future as to Arab-Jewish relations in Israel, Arabs playing a greater role in politics and society, and a greater common understanding and perhaps cooperation between Jews and Arabs in Israel. It all depends, of course, on Netanyahu stopping to delegitimize the Arab population, which he cannot but do all the time. And if he changes it, if it changes from the top, it will certainly change bottom up. And I hope that also among the ministers in the new government, new unity government, if created, that there will find a room space for an Arab minister for the very first time in a long time.
Interesting thought. This is a perfect transition to next week, where we will dedicate a whole hour to this question of the Arab citizens of Israel, of the joint list, where are they standing now, and probably we'll also comment on the developments within the negotiations within the next week. We will have two experts from within the Arab-Israeli community, Professor Murad El-Sana from American University and Professor Salman Al-Badour from Howard University, both Bedouins who grew up near Beersheba, and both experts on these questions. So I would like to take this opportunity to thank our speakers and to thank all of you for joining us from DC, from Maryland, Virginia, and Israel. And hopefully we will see each other again a week from now, same day, same time. Laura, you want to say something before we all check out?
We will be sending you a link to that conversation. I agree with Michael. It's wonderful seeing your faces. I see Judy Spector even wore her American University t-shirt. So thank you. This really is a community, and it's wonderful seeing all of you. So many students and recent alumni and members of our Israel Studies Council and friends of the center. So thank you so much.
I also want to say special hello to the founder of the center, Howard Wachtel, who is also here with us. And of course, thank you, Laura, for setting this up. And thank you to Eric for making the technology happen. Thank you.
And wishing everyone a wonderful Passover or East celebration and Easter celebration coming this week.
Absolutely. Thank you. Bye.
Shalom.